As some of you may know or may not know, Donald Trump signed some executive orders a few days ago, kind of demanding a plan for the potential full release of the remaining documents at the various agencies for John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, and Martin Luther King Jr. Um, I'm not going to really talk too much about Martin Luther King today. I think that kind of deserves somewhat of a separate video. But I do encourage many of you to at least check out this book. It's called The Plot to Kill King: The Truth Behind the Assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. It was written by Dr. William F. Pepper, Esquire. He was the attorney for Coretta Scott King. He was able to give out a lot of detailed information and evidence, kind of showing that um, there was an inside plot with the Dixie Mafia, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and the Tennessee Police to pretty much have King killed. Um, so definitely want to check that out. And just on a side note, um, to he also was, and he did pass away earlier this year. Um, but on February 22nd, 2012, Pepper and Coal Council Laurie Dusick filed a court brief in the District of Los Angeles claiming that a second gunman fired the shots that killed RFK, petitioning for the release of their client, Sirhan Sirhan. Pepper believes that Sirhan, who claims to have no memory of the shooting, was programmed under hypnosis to shoot and provide a distraction from the actual gunman who got away. Hypnosis expert, medical um, Harvard Medical School professor Daniel P. Brown concluded that Sirhan did not act under his own volition and knowledge at the time of the shooting. He was what they call a maturing candidate. Um, and of course, mainstream media, ABC News said that the story had all the makings of a great conspiracy theory. Obviously, Sirhan was again denied parole February 10th, 2016. Um, and then 2016, the Ninth Circuit denied a further appeal launched by Pepper, um, shown that jurists of reason would find it debatable whether the petition states a valid claim of denial of a constitutional right, and that jurists of reason would find it debatable whether the district court was correct in its procedural ruling. Obviously, um, uh, all of this kind of say that believe the assassination was the first major incident of political violence stemming from the Israel-Palestine conflict. So, obviously, we can definitely go into MK Ultra. Obviously, it is pretty much a began in 1953 and so-called was halted in 1973. MK Ultra was used numerous methods to manipulate a subject's mental states and brain functions, such as covert administration of high doses of psychedelic drugs, especially LSD and other chemicals, without the subject's consent. Additionally, other methods beyond chemical compounds were used, including electric shocks, hypnosis. That's what they're kind of saying before. Sensory deprivation, isolation, verbal and sexual abuse, and other forms of torture. Um, Obviously, we're not going to go too deep into this, but I definitely recommend you reading this book. It's called Chaos. Um, so this definitely kind of talks about how Charles Manson was pretty much approached, um, and probably initially unknowingly by the CIA. This MK Ultra was experimented on him, and he was just a kind of a Manchurian candidate, a test dummy to kind of go out there and into Hollywood and commit these assassinations. So that's just kind of giving a little bit about that. But it's not really what I wanted to get to. I wanted to kind of go to a few clips. Um, One being, um, not my favorite guy in the world. I'm not gonna lie, Pierce Morgan, but he definitely has. I want to double check. I think his name is David Baker. I want to be sure. Um, Mike Baker obviously kind of gives me Andrew Bustamante vibes. Still part of the agency. Um, but the guy that I really do like a lot is Michael Francis. Some of you may not know who he is. He was a crime boss from the Colombo crime family. Um, Obviously, I mean, he has his own YouTube channel. It's pretty big. Um, I really recommend you kind of going out there and taking a look. Obviously, he was full on a um, part of the life in the Colombo crime family. Dad was an underboss. Sonny friend, Sonny Francis, he was a capo. So for those who don't know, bosses up here, lawyer or advisor, consigliere, underboss, and capos are here. So definitely high, middle rank, medium rank, high rank. Um, was let him tell was a great earner, but I kind of want to go. So this is obviously Jefferson
An
Morley
executive order ordering the
on
declassification of
here.
files
My
relating.
bad. Jefferson Morley and big um JFK um investigator. Probably knows more about anything than just about everybody. But definitely want to kind of get into the part, at least for the first couple minutes, talking about the mob's involvement. Um, Let me think. Yeah, definitely just review the first couple minutes. Then we're gonna go over here to Tucker. Um, shit. Um, he's also again with Jefferson Morley. So definitely want to talk about this. I kind of don't want to spend too much time on it, but Jefferson makes a very valid point, and we may just kind of go up to the end with the other countries that may have been involved in killing JFK. So yeah, let's begin.
To the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
That's a big one, huh? A lot of people are waiting for this for years, for decades. And everything will be revealed. Okay? Give that to RFK Jr.
Yes, sir.
Okay?
Well, the official narrative surrounding the assassinations of JFK, RFK, and Dr. Martin Luther King, namely that all three were killed by lone gunmen, have long been questioned by those who suspect wider involvement. That includes the man many say has been the catalyst for Trump's dramatic declassification edict, RFK Jr. Well, here's how he reacted to the news of the executive order.
You think that that's the right move to declassify those documents?
I think it's a great move because we need to have more transparency in our government, and he's keeping his promise to have the government tell the truth to the American people about everything.
Well, I'm joined to debate all this by my three guests, each with their own unique perspective on what these declassified documents could reveal. Jefferson Morley is a journalist and historian. He's written extensively about the JFK assassination and the CIA. Michael Franzese, once a capo in the Colombo crime family, thinks the mob played a critical role in the killing of Kennedy. And the former CIA officer Mike Baker, who says he's not a conspiracy guy and that Oswald could have made the shot on his own. Well, welcome to all of you. Let me start with you, if I may, Jefferson. You've written a lot about this. Your belief is that the most likely theory.
So, as I said, Mike Baker just kind of gives me Andrew Bustamante vibes. He's really just there to give out misinformation. I implore you to watch the whole thing, but one of their tactics is obviously misinformation, disinformation, just full on spook shit. So I think his objective right now, probably Andrew's objective in the near future, um, and Sean Ryan, a lot of their objective over the next couple weeks, couple months, is literally just going to be running a disinformation or misinformation campaign and literally just calling everything a conspiracy theory. Um, so y'all could be the judge of that. But hey, that's what you're paid to do. So, and you're also talking about guys, most of these people, they leave intelligence or they leave, agencies in the government and they still have the security clearance. So obviously to keep the security clearance and to keep, being able to get favors and to get information or to give information or just to be able to have um the agencies on your side, it's best not to disrupt them. And when they ask for a small favor, you go run interference.
And we may discover more meat on this theory bone, is that JFK was killed by enemies within the United States government. And by that, do you mean the CIA?
The CIA and the Pentagon. That's what the preponderance of evidence that's come out in the last 20 years tells us. Yeah.
So explain for those who are not as expert as you are, just explain, right, Jefferson, for those who have not as read as much as you had, but what are the key things that have emerged in the last 20 years that have led you to that conclusion?
Three things. One is the testimony of the doctors who tried to save Kennedy's life. These 7 doctors didn't really talk publicly until they got together in 2011, 2010. And their views are expressed on an excellent documentary on Paramount Plus called What the Doctors Saw. And those doctors who tried to save Kennedy's life, who examined his wounds in the 30 minutes before he died, said unanimously that Kennedy had been hit by gunfire from 2 different directions. So right there, that is powerful refutation of the government's already weak lone gunman theory. A second thing that I think is very important, and we only learned in 2017, the CIA itself did not believe the lone gunman theory. A few days after Kennedy was assassinated, the CIA station in Miami launched its own internal investigation of Kennedy's death. They did not investigate Lee Harvey Oswald. They did not investigate organized crime. They didn't investigate the KGB. They didn't investigate Fidel Castro. They didn't investigate the aliens who were flying those drones over New Jersey. They investigated exiles known to the CIA in South Florida. And that report, the findings of that internal investigation, were never released. And finally, in April 2023, the CIA's pre-assassination file on Lee Harvey Oswald was completely...
So to kind of give a little bit of a backstory, a lot of these exiles in Florida are covert ops, trained by the CIA, inside the CIA, people like Felix Rodriguez. They pretty much left Cuba at the time of Fidel kind of doing his second revolution. Just a quick brief story. Fidel failed his first revolution. him and his brother. So they were imprisoned, then exiled to Mexico, where they met Che. Then they get a boat on the Grand Mama, go back to Cuba, start this revolution. And a lot of people started exiting around that time. The former president Batista also exited. So now, mind you, according to Fidel's autobiography, the CIA literally and the American government sided, gave weapons to both sides of the conflict, kind of pretty much wanting favors out of return. So the mob had already infiltrated Cuba at that time. Um, Mayor Lansky, Lucky Luciano, the whole commission literally started, building up mob resorts down there, casinos, sending a lot of money down there. Plus, there was the United Fruit Company. There was already properties in Cuba. It already been um, it had already been, kind of a destination place and um, orchestrated by, uh, mob ties and wealthy Americans. But obviously, they wanted to colonize it, make it a state or a territory of America. It never really happened. This kind of dates back to late 1800s. But when they're talking about they did this investigation on them, these guys in Miami, a lot of these guys were used by the CIA under Allen Dulles, who ended up having a problem with Kennedy because Kennedy had a problem with the failed Bay of Missions assassination attempt or invasion. It wasn't an assassination attempt, but an invasion attempt to go in there to assassinate Fidel Castro. So obviously he had a problem with that. It made him look bad. It was a failed mission. Um, Fidel already knew that they were coming. Also, a lot of those weapons that they needed had already been sent to Israel, and they had already been doing test runs in Puerto Rico at the time, before they actually did this Bay of Pigs attempt. So a lot of these guys that he's referring to, this investigation is literally they were, you know, Cuban exiles.
Declassified for the first time. Imagine that. The so-called lone gunman, his file was so sensitive that it took 61 years to totally declassify it. What does that file show us? It's not a smoking gun, but it does show that Oswald was not, repeat, not a lone nut. He was a known quantity, known to a handful of CIA officers working for counterintelligence chief James Angleton. So with that as the fact pattern that we now have, that the Warren Commission conclusion is not correct and something else happened, I think what we're going to find out is in these files that to come, we're going to see more of the fact pattern that has emerged in the last 20 years, that the Warren Commission is wrong and something else happened probably involving people in the U.S. government.
It's interesting because, Mike Baker, you are a former CIA officer. When you hear these theories that maybe it was an inside job effectively by the U.S. government, maybe the CIA were involved, do you think that's even remotely feasible?
Well, look, never say never, right? And one thing I've learned in 40 years of investigations and operations is, until you've got all the evidence in front of you, you can't rule anything out, right? Yes. I mean, that's good common sense. I have a feeling, though, that once they release the remaining documents, and I think people should understand that a vast majority of the documents have already been released, right? So we're not talking about a lot of records here, right? And my concern is that there won't be a smoking gun, as we just mentioned, but I think that it won't stop a variety of the conspiracy theories. I think it's going to be an unsatisfactory release, is what I guess I'm saying here. I think what it will show is what was just pointed out was, yes, Lee Harvey Oswald was a known quantity for a reason, for a counterintelligence reason, right? He had moved over to the Soviet Union. He had lived there in an unsatisfactory manner in his mind for some time. He had traveled down to Mexico weeks before the assassination. to meet with the Cuban consul, and he was desperate to prove his value to the revolution. Right. So, yes, he was known. And I think what the release of the documents may show, as opposed to a smoking gun and satisfy all the various conspiracy theories, is that it was inadequate work on the part of the CIA and the FBI in terms of following up on Lee Harvey Oswald.
Michael, let me ask you a question as a CIA officer. The director of counterintelligence of the CIA knew that Lee Harvey Oswald was in Texas in early November 1963. Is that an intelligence failure in your mind? Was Kennedy's assassination
that's what I mean. I think what we'll see is
that's what we've already learned.
You know, it's apples and oranges, but somewhat akin to what we saw in 9/11, a failure to coordinate across the board, right? So
there was no such thing as a failure. The CIA and the FBI already had complete knowledge of what the fuck was going on. There had already been warning signs given. But literally, there's also involvement with Mossad, which is the Israeli version of the CIA. So, like I said, they're either going to try to push. They're either not going to give all the information. It's going to be super fucking redacted. So it's just going to be just a sheet with a whole bunch of black markings. That way the conspiracy theories can continue. Trump also has a history of protecting the CIA. But a lot of that had to do with Mike Pompeo. Now that he's gone, we'll see what kind of happens. But you're also talking about, you know, presidents come and go, the deep state is forever. So you're literally talking about 20, 30, 40-year bureaucrats that literally run one of the most powerful agencies in the entire world outside of Mossad, who's probably equally funded, equally involved in operations and counterintelligence. So to act like 9/11 and the JFK thing was just a failed mission is fucking deplorable. It doesn't even make fucking sense. Why would you be following a guy for 4 years before, and then magically, you know, this dude ends up killing, you know, the fucking sitting president? Like, no.
The FBI,
the CIA doesn't say that, by the way.
Yeah, what's that?
The CIA, by the way, and no investigative body has ever said that. What the investigative bodies were told was, and I quote Director Richard Helms under oath, "We only had minimal information about him." Is 180 pages of material on Lee Harvey Oswald minimal?
Yeah, look, again, from a counterintelligence perspective,
no, it's not. I mean, it's plainly not.
I know. Yeah, but we got to have a conversation here where one of us only talks at a time.
Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, my point is, from a counterintelligence perspective, Lee Harvey Oswald is exactly the sort of person that the agency and the Bureau should have been focused on, right? And so what I'm saying
should
is,
they have lied to the Warren Commission about that?
Yeah, may well show that was not being done, and I think it could be embarrassing to the government, and may well have been the reason why in 2017, during Trump's first term, some of the material was kept classified.
Okay, yeah. But Mike Baker, before I go to Michael Francis for the mob side of this, in terms of theories, you actually went to the Dallas Book Depository, didn't you? And you tried to make the shot yourself, and you concluded it wasn't an impossible shot. In other words, it was possible that the theory that Lee Harvey Oswald just fired this bullet that went through two people was what happened.
Yeah, look, the point being is that the shot itself was not a difficult shot, right? There was no wind. It was moving in a straight line. He had recce'd the location ahead of time from a operational perspective, and he had sufficient training as a Marine. It's not hard to say, okay, oh my God, there's no way this guy could have made the shot. So my point is, he could have made the shot. Again, I go back to the same thing. It's like with MLK, Martin Luther King, which I think is definitely an investigation that needs to be dug into much harder, right? You can never say never until you have all the evidence in front of you. So I'm not drawing a line under this and saying we know for a fact what happened. I'm just saying that the release of the remaining.
Well, the reason why he's saying that is because the Federal Bureau of Investigation had more involvement in the killing of MLK versus the CIA. RFK and JFK were huge potential international threats to the CIA's establishment, and it can't be forgotten about that.
Documents will probably not be a satisfying experience.
Right, I think you may be right. Let's bring in Michael Francis, who's been waiting very patiently. I want to tee you up, Michael, by playing a clip. This is RFK Jr.'s daughter-in-law, who is come out and said this to Tucker Carlson. Let's take a look.
And I feel something of a responsibility to get to the bottom of that, at least in my lifetime, for my children. You know, I mean, my daughter Bobcat is Bobby the fourth, so her great grandfather was RFK, and I want to be able to look at her and for her to know whether or not her own government was involved in these assassinations, and if so, what's been done about it to make sure that that never ever happens again, that there's never a coup like that in this country again. And I think when you look at the collaboration that was going on in those days between the intelligence community and organized crime and the mob, you know, there were very blurry boundaries.
Yeah.
Michael, you know, you said if you believe Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone, then you believe in Santa Claus. One of the big theories, of course, is that both the Kennedy brothers were, you know, thick as thieves with a lot of the mob, and that this was not a connection that should be ruled out. Explain why you think this might be one of the theories, and it may be we get more information about that if these files get released.
Well, Pierce, I can only tell you what I've heard my entire life, and that was from the time Kennedy got killed. You know, people in the mob hated Kennedys, you know, and normally guys in the mob don't want to take credit for things like this. They'd rather not talk about it. Not the thugs, I mean the people in charge. People like Carmine Persico, who was the boss of the Colombo family, Tony Salerno, boss of the Genovese family, and my father, who was very high up at the time. You know, it goes back, I was 12 years old when Kennedy got killed, and I just remember my father saying things to my mother, don't feel bad about these guys were rats, they double-crossed us, and so on and so forth. Cut to the time that I was in the life, and, you know, I heard consistently from Persico, from Tony, from my father, that what I believe it came down is that the CIA had come to, they said the CIA, people in government who were part of this assassination plot with the Kennedys, came to us afterwards and asked that Oswald be killed. Jack Ruby, I don't know why people deny that he wasn't mobbed up. He was totally mobbed up. You know, from the time he was in Chicago, he had relationships with Sam Giancana. He had relationships with Joe Campisi, who was really the boss of Dallas, who was very close with Carlos Marcello in New Orleans. And he also had cops on his payroll. He was able to get entry into Oswald. Now, I will tell you this, what I also heard is this, and again, these people don't brag about things like this. They're talking matter-of-factly. You know, the fact that allegedly, what I was told, they had a deal with Joe Kennedy, who I know was definitely in touch with and had relationships with Frank Costello during his bootlegging days. There's no question about that. People can deny it, they can, but I've heard that my entire life too. And that guys in Chicago were instrumental in helping many of the labor unions, you know, vote for the Democrats. Now, Chicago's a mob-run city. You know, it always was, you know, from the days of Capone on forward. And the mob played a part in helping deliver. And that was a very tight election between Kennedy and Nixon. And the deal was that the heat was supposed to be off. And what I heard afterwards, Robert Kennedy, who my father hated, my father believes Robert Kennedy was the one that really pursued him, put him away for 50 years, that the Justice Department was supposed to back off us, and instead they went on even harder. And so if I had to take a lie detector and swear to it, what I've heard my entire life from people in the know, there was definitely mob involvement in that. Jack Ruby was definitely hooked up with us. And look, that wasn't the first time the CIA came to us. I mean, they did it, you know, they tried to assassinate, what's his name? Castro from Cuba. They went to Johnny Rosella and Sam Giancana. And what about, you know, during World War II? when they went to Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky for help to get the Allies into Sicily. So is it, I don't believe that the United States government ever wants to get word out there that the mob had anything to do with assassinating a sitting president. So I don't know if it's ever going to be revealed, but if I had to swear to it, it was a matter of life and death for me, based upon everything I heard from the right people, I'd have to say there's no doubt in my mind.
Fascinating. Jefferson, I saw you nodding to quite a lot of that. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that the Kennedy family
Michael's absolutely.
I was going to say that the Kennedy family had a lot of contact with the mob in varying ways, and there's no doubt that the general perceived wisdom is that they went back on a deal when JFK became president. They reneged on a deal to be more helpful to the mob, and in fact went the other way, and it ended up with Robert Kennedy really targeting them and going after them. So there was clearly a sense of betrayal there from members of the mob at the time. I think that is indisputable. Do you think it's a stretch to say that maybe they were behind all this?
I think Michael had it exactly right. The organized crime rule was to eliminate Oswald, the inconvenient witness, and they used their pawn, Jack Ruby, to do that. I don't think that organized crime organized the whole ambush in Dealey Plaza. That was a very sophisticated operation. And organized crime, when they decide to take somebody out, they don't shoot at a moving target in a public space. They kill them behind doors or give them cement shoes. So the operation itself seems more sophisticated than an organized crime. But Michael's absolutely right about the organized crime role in the events of 1963. Organized crime helped silence the CIA pawn, Lee Harvey Oswald.
Mike Baker, let's take a look at a clip of Lee Harvey Oswald. This is after he was arrested.
I really don't know what the situation is about. Nobody has told me anything except that I'm accused of murdering a policeman. I know nothing more than that, and I do request for someone to come forward to give me a legal assistance.
Did you kill the president?
No, I've not been charged with that. In fact, nobody has said that to me yet.
You know what struck me, Mike, was just until recently, I was always of the view.
So, short story long, Lee Harvey Oswald was accused. Jack Ruby felt the need, kind of pretty much had a gun on him, walked into the police station and shot Lee Harvey Oswald. Pretty much later on, Michael kind of talks about that here. Let me see. I want to say right about here. Let me double check.
Document heavily redacted. Angleton controlled the Oswald file from 1959 to 1963, so that document should be made public immediately. CIA surveillance operations in Mexico City that picked up on Oswald, there's a 77-page report on those, heavily redacted. That should be declassified. So this isn't a fishing expedition, and we're not looking for smoking guns. We're looking at the fact pattern that will establish that the government's account of the crime is not correct, and we need a better explanation.
And Michael Francis, I mean, if I was an American Michael Francis, I mean, you have a right to know this stuff. I mean, this involves the assassination of one of your presidents, the assassination of potentially the next president in Bobby Kennedy, and then the assassination, obviously, of Martin Luther King as well. We haven't got to that, but in terms of JFK in particular, the American people, I think, have a fundamental right to know this stuff.
Absolutely, Pearson. What I would like to see, if they deny the fact that Jack Ruby had mob connections. Because if they deny that, then I know this whole thing is a sham. Because he absolutely 100% mob connections his entire life, going back to Chicago. And then I think, Campisi, who was a very powerful mob guy in Dallas, he had, connections with all the strip clubs and the places that Ruby was involved in. Because you don't hear much about Jack Ruby, that you see was some lone nut, If they lie about his connections, then that says it all to me. I wouldn't believe anything that came out of that from that point on, because he was definitely connected to us.
Let me ask you, Michael, with the mob theory, Michael, it's such a big thing to do, whoever you are, to be involved in the assassination of an American president. You were in the mob a long time at a pretty high level. could you ever countenance the idea that that would happen, that you would have the mob in any way, any one of the families being directly complicit in the involved assassination of a president?
The answer to me is yes, because, it was during that time. I always say this, Pierce, the golden years of the mob in the United States was really from the late 40s, mid 40s, right through to the mid 80s when Giuliani went wild with the RICO Act and put a lot of damage in. We had a lot of power at that time. You're talking about, 50, 60, 70. We had a lot of power. And, Sam Giancana, very powerful guy, Carlos Marcelli, all the 5 families in New York. We had power and connections, and it's not inconceivable. Again, the CIA, I think it's a matter of fact that they came to us on 2 occasions. And why would they not come to us at this point in time, too? We had the ability. And look, Jack Ruby had the connections. He had a lot of connections with the police department. He was able to get into that area that night. I don't know if they questioned him. I mean, the guy had a gun on him. How did he get in there at that point in time? Look, it's absolutely not out of the question. And like I said, Pierce, if you had to give me a lie detector test and my life depended on it, everything that I've heard points to mob involvement in that. And again, I want to, reiterate what this other gentleman said. I'm not saying we were involved from day one, but I know that we hated the Kennedys. There was no question about that. As a matter of fact, I think there was one, Sam Giancana was caught on tape saying we killed the wrong Kennedy, because it was really Bobby, from what I understand, that went against Joe Kennedy and John Kennedy and still continued going after the mob when he was supposed to back off. And I think I heard that there was some kind of discussion about that Frank Sinatra came back and told Giancana they can't control Bobby. I heard that also. So no, there was a lot of stuff pointing to the fact, but I'm telling you that the key is here. If they deny that Jack Ruby was not all mobbed off and had mob connections, this whole thing is false.
Fascinating. And finally, Mike Baker. I mean,
so yeah, I mean, if y'all want to come back and watch the whole thing, that's great. But definitely wanted to kind of get over here to Tucker, play a few clips.
Yeah. So another story which I reported on JFK Facts last year. Before President Kennedy was assassinated in November 1963, the CIA had Lee Harvey Oswald under surveillance for 4 years. By November 21st, 1963, they had compiled 180 pages of material on Oswald. His personal life, his political beliefs, his contact with a KGB officer, his arrest. They had all of that at the time Kennedy was leaving for Dallas. CIA counterintelligence chief James Angleton knew that Oswald was in the Dallas area in the first week of November of 1963. That pre-assassination Oswald file was not completely declassified until April 2023. That's how sensitive this is. And they're very good at keeping this stuff off the public record. And, now when you go to people in the mainstream media, they won't report on Oswald's pre-assassination file. They'll say, they were just covering their asses. They make excuses for the CIA instead of saying, hey, you had 180 pages on the guy? Was that extreme negligence, intentional negligence, or actual complicity? And we don't know. But that file is, the pre-assassination Oswald file is one of the most significant things to come out in recent years, for sure.
So was that given over to the investigators of the Warren Commission?
No. When the Warren Commission interviewed CIA Director John McCone and Deputy Director Richard Helms behind closed doors, only Warren Commission members there were Alan Dulles and Gerald Ford, and John Sherman Cooper was there for a little bit. They lied. I mean, they committed perjury, especially Helms, and said, we didn't have any information about Oswald before the assassination. Minimal information. That was the line. So in their mind, 180-page file on Oswald, that was minimal information. Pay no attention and don't hold us accountable for, missing the fact that this guy killed the president. We're sorry, Mrs. Kennedy, but that's just the way life is. That's their attitude. It's bland arrogance, and we see it to this day.
I want to tell you about an amazing documentary series from our friend Sean Stone called All the President's Men, The Conspiracy Against Imposed. Have you been slandered as a nutcase conspiracy theorist? I always wondered, like, what do they do with you exactly? Because you're not coming from the fringes. You're coming from right from the middle of the establishment.
I mean,
have you been attacked?
Yeah, I mean, the problem that they have is that I don't have a conspiracy theory, so the label of conspiracy theorist just doesn't apply. And the other thing is, nobody can deny the stuff that I'm talking about. Let me mention another JFK document that's very important and I think will interest you. One of the things that's withheld and is in the JFK collection right now is the testimony of James Angleton in 1975 to the Church Committee about the Israeli nuclear program. This is a 113-page document, and it's heavily redacted to this day. And the redactions clearly pertain to Israel. Now, is this an assassination-related document? Absolutely. The Assassination Records Review Board said this is an assassination-related document. It meets the statutory definition. Okay? If the president and this effort are serious, that testimony will be declassified because Angleton controlled the Oswald file on the one hand, and he was a contact with the Israelis on the other. So it belongs in the public record. That's another test of, is this serious effort?
So let me ask you, why in the world would the Dimona project, the Israeli nuclear program, which is...
All right, why is Tucker laughing? Because he knows. Not about the JFK, but how powerful they are.
Never officially been admitted by anybody but Israel. What would that conceivably have to do with the assassination of JFK?
Well, it relates to what Angleton was doing in 1963, okay? There were profound conflicts between Israel and the Kennedy White House over the nuclear program. Kennedy was pressing for on-site inspections, which the Israelis resisted because on-site inspections would have realized that they had a bomb-making program. So this was a real bone of contention between the Israeli government and the Kennedy administration in the summer of 1963, at a time when Angleton controlled the Oswald file. So just the juxtaposition of those facts means that everything about it should be on the public record.
And Angleton, who is the counter-intel chief at CIA,
yeah,
James Jesus Angleton, he... That's quite amazing. Did he support, do you know his view of the Israeli nuclear program?
I mean, it's very hard to tell sometimes from this testimony, given all the redactions. But yeah, that's, was he secretly supporting Israel against JFK? That's one of the questions that needs to be answered by full disclosure.
So why would he be asked about that in a congressional hearing? That's quite amazing.
Well, because in 1975, the CIA had been revealed to be running assassination programs, to be running a mind control program, to be spying on the anti-war movement, spying on Americans. So, he was hauled before, and Congress, who was completely in the dark, had been duped or wanted to be duped. Suddenly their eyes woke up and they had to explain to their constituents, hey, what have these guys been doing in our name? And so Angleton was called in, and this was all, executive session testimony. So he was grilled about lots of things, about domestic spying, about the Israeli nuclear program, about the JFK assassination. Interestingly enough, he was not questioned about Oswald because even the Church Committee did not know the extent of the pre-assassination surveillance of Oswald. That's only something we've learned since the 1990s.
It is interesting. I mean, I have no idea what the truth is, of course, but it is interesting that one of the only major policy changes that Lyndon Johnson made in the year after the president's murder was, on the Israeli nuclear program, which he accepted.
Basically, he dropped the demand for on-site inspections. He dropped the demand that AIPAC be classified as a domestic lobby. And, There was really no accountability after that. And the story only emerged.
And also that the USS Liberty was bombed, shot down, and shot, and even more shot, and U.S. Navy soldiers ended up getting killed. Some still survived by Israel. So, and Lyndon B. Johnson wanted to cover that shit the fuck up. So, surprise, surprise.
Emerged, 10 years later when the church committee started pressing Angleton for some explanations.
So I had no idea until you just told me that was actually a feature of those hearings. And so, of course, I mean, the American public has an absolute right to know what's in that exchange 50 years later. And
this is a tough call for the president, because he's going to get very strong pushback from his national security apparatus, supported by the CIA, supported by Israeli interests, to say, no, you can't talk about that. That's not permitted. You don't do that.
Yeah, it's frustrating as an American citizen. But, I don't have any kind of real agenda here other than it's, my country. I'm a shareholder in America, as are you. And right. I think we have an absolute moral right and a legal right to know this 50 years later. So, I really appreciate your taking all this time, Jefferson Morley. And I hope you don't mind if we check in with you, to see if the promise is fulfilled.
Like I say, there's some very clear benchmarks to figure out, is this working or not? And, are people holding up the process and obstructing the president's wishes? Or are they really going along? And so the proof is in the pudding. The president's sentiment is great. It's great that a president has committed to this. It's amazing that no president has committed in this way before, but we'll take it. I'm not a supporter of President Trump, but on this issue, he's absolutely right, and we need to follow through on what he said.
All right, so definitely,
why don't she run in 2028 and her number one thing should be get rid of AIPAC and Israel lobby? See what it does.
Good luck.
No, what I'm saying is run on that. I'm actually not saying good luck. He's saying good luck.
I'm saying good luck.
Yeah. No, what he's saying is good luck, you win. What I'm saying is.
And the reason why Adam Sosnak is saying that is because he's Jewish. And he's a fucking Zionist.
Go see how many more people are for that. And that's America. Go prove your argument. Get support and run on that. Because when you're campaigning, a president chooses a handful of things to campaign on. You want Trump's top 5 to be Israel? No. By the way, every single president since Nixon days had a hard time negotiating with Israel. Every single one of them. And you know why it was? Half the battle for them was when Kissinger and Ford were pissed off and they came out with a plan and they what do you call it? Where it's like,
they brushed them off?
Congress passed it.
Mm-hmm. But the House wasn't going to do it.
Yeah, they passed it.
Yeah.
Because Israel, the lobbyists, they had won over so many people in Congress that they were going to go that way because that's where the money was coming from. Mm-hmm. You know the Bowman guy that got replaced?
Yeah.
And who's the other guy? Ilhan Omar? Cory
Bush.
Cory Bush. Guess who got rid of those two guys? AIPAC. Mm-hmm. Do you want them in there or do you want them out?
I want them out. Yeah, so it's like a catch-22.
AIPAC helped you.
Of course.
But he's only saying that literally because he's a diehard Republican and he hates leftists. Yeah. I mean, you actually have to think, do you want somebody of another party that you don't support, yet they're not bought and paid for by Israel, by AIPAC? I mean,
this is such a it's such a Tom, you look like you want to say something.
Tom,
Go
please.
ahead, Tom.
No, I'm sitting here listening, and what people have to understand, and I'm going to step away from all the inflammatory stuff. One point, I'm not going to comment on that. What Pat just said is very important. Nixon Kissinger, Ford Kissinger, Carter Zbigniew Brzezinski, I think. No, Cyrus Vance. And you go through all the Secretary of States and the presidents. They're trying to negotiate certain things up here. And they effectively have term limits, 8 years, right?
Yep.
Well, it's like what Nancy Pelosi said about W. W may be here for 8 years. We'll be here a lot longer. We can manage it. Manage it. Israel functions almost like a senior senator. They are, and what does a senior senator do? I'll give you the bridge deal. I'll give you the farm deal. You got my vote. But hey, I need you on the pharma deal, and I need you on the crime bill. And it goes back and forth like that. That's what Israel does in our own Senate and Congress. So when they're out there at the foreign policy level trying to do it, Israel is responding the same way that Nancy Pelosi responded to W. Don't worry about it. We can maneuver around this because we've got other things in play. We'll get the bill we want. We'll get the defense spending we want. We'll get the foreign aid package we want. That's the way the game is played. So I'm not going to comment on all the other things. What it is they have become an incredibly effective country that operates even better than some of the biggest lobbyists that we have in our own government. Yeah. And you sit back and you look at it and you say, you don't have to like it, but that's the game. That's actually the political game. That's the way the game is played. And they're just playing it superbly well to get what they want. And the difference between Big Pharma, which is practically a country, in Israel is at the base level, not a lot. But they're getting what they want and what they feel their interests are.
But are we supposed to let them get away with murder just because the enemy is way worse at doing murder? That's my point.
Well, wait a minute. Hang on.
Yes.
Hang on. Back off.
And so wait, no,
hang on.
You're saying
hang
yes?
On. No, stop.
No,
Adam,
that's ridiculous.
Stop. Were you talking about Israel or Big Pharma?
Yeah, both.
No,
yeah,
but do you see the point?
Yeah, no, I got you. Yeah, exactly.
Now you guys can go
Here's
fight.
what you're failing to understand.
Please tell me what I'm failing.
And you just think of this in non-emotional, reacting, like I'm in love with Candace Owens and everything she says.
You're in love with the
digest. I'm just saying.
Okay.
There's no perfect country on earth, bro.
I know that.
Do you though?
Yeah, I criticized Bush while I was in the military. That's why I left the military.
Precisely.
So continue, yeah.
So you've been critical of your own government.
1,000%.
You're critical
That's why
of
I love this country.
Kamala Harris. You're critical of Biden. You've even been critical of Trump.
Thank you.
That's how this works. You know, I said that, everyone has to choose their enemies wisely. And I asked you, the enemy of my enemy is my
friend.
You got it right this time. I love you.
I was messing with you.
So you have to put every country on a 1 through 10 scale. The countries that you're most aligned with are 8s, 9s, and 10s. I would argue there's probably not a 10 out there that knows every single one of our secrets.
Well, Adam is a fucking Zionist. Yeah, bruh. I don't even know how he's still on this fucking show. But, and I've been watching this show on and off for some years. But, short story long, Adam is a Zionist. Y'all are more than welcome to hear his argument. I'm good on that. But, yeah, I just wanted to kind of release a few things for y'all to take a look at. Obviously, there's more research. This is just the surface. So, yeah. Make sure that, you're on the lookout to see if if they do release anything, if they don't, if anything's redacted, if anything's missing, if anything's, kind of just misinformation. So we'll definitely be on the lookout. This is definitely, top priorities. So I definitely wanted to get a few of these videos together, but just remember, it was clearly Alan Dulles with the CIA. It was clearly a mob hit. And it was clearly, pretty much brought on by Israel as well. So definitely got to take a look at that. But y'all be good. Y'all be safe. Peace.